You think if she's still talking to you, still seeing you, still saying all the right words, then you're still the one she's choosing. But a woman can keep you in her life while her heart is still orbiting someone else. You think the real threat is another man touching her. It's not. The real threat is another man owning emotional space inside her that you can never force open. And that's the part you don't want to hear because it means this is not a game you win by trying harder. This is not a puzzle you solve by becoming more available, more patient, more understanding, more impressive. If you need reminders like this, subscribe, not because I need your click, but because you need this truth in your ears when your emotions start negotiating with reality. You need clarity when chemistry starts dressing confusion up like love. You need a voice that tells you what your loneliness keeps trying to edit out. Here's what it really means when she's emotionally attached to someone else. It means you are not dealing with a present tense relationship. You are dealing with divided attachment. Her body may be here. Her messages may be here. Her routine may be here, but her emotional center of gravity is somewhere else. Maybe it's an ex. Maybe it's a man she never fully had. Maybe it's a fantasy she built around someone who gave her intensity but not stability. Maybe it's unresolved grief, unfinished validation, a story she still hasn't let die. Whatever the source, the result is the same. You are trying to build something real with someone whose feelings are still rented out to another emotional address. Most men miss this because they're looking for obvious betrayal. They want proof. They want screenshots. They want a confession. They want a villain. But divided attachment rarely announces itself that clearly. It leaks out in energy. It shows up in patterns. It reveals itself in where her aliveness goes. Pay attention. A woman emotionally free and emotionally available does not have to be perfect, but she is present. You feel her here. You feel her choosing. You feel her emotional weight landing where her words say it is. But when she's attached elsewhere, something is off. She is with you, but not fully with you. She responds, but without warmth. She laughs, but there's distance in it. She accepts your effort, but doesn't deepen with you. She keeps the connection alive without ever truly feeding it. That's called emotional limbo. And emotional limbo is where weak men get trained to abandon themselves. You start second-guessing what you already feel. You start saying maybe she's just busy. Maybe she's just healing. Maybe she's just scared. Maybe if I stay solid long enough, she'll come around. Maybe if I prove I'm different, she'll finally let go of the past. Listen carefully. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. Understanding without standards becomes permission. And patience in the wrong place becomes slow self-destruction. How do you tell? You look at where her emotional intensity lives. Not what she says in calm moments. Not what she posts. Not what she promises when she feels guilty. You look at what activates her. Mention his name and her whole nervous system changes. Ask a simple question and suddenly she becomes protective, vague, irritated, overly careful, or overly defensive. That's information. She may say she's over it, but her energy says it still matters. And energy is harder to fake than language. You look at what she compares you to, even when she doesn't say it directly. Maybe she doesn't mention another man out loud, but you feel like you're being measured against a ghost. You bring steadiness, she calls it boring. You bring peace, she seems restless. You bring honesty, she responds like something is missing. Why? Because when someone is still bonded to intensity, peace feels unfamiliar. When someone is still attached to fantasy, reality feels flat. That doesn't mean you are lacking. It means she is calibrated to a different emotional drug. That's called association imprint. She has linked depth with chaos, passion with unpredictability, love with longing. So now a grounded man feels less exciting than a destabilizing memory. And if you don't understand that, you will spend months trying to become more chaotic just to feel chosen. You stop being yourself. You stop trusting your own pace. You stop speaking simply. You stop moving clean. You start over-explaining. You start proving. You start reading her tone like it's a stock market. You start calling confusion a connection because confusion at least feels alive. And the whole time, your self-respect is bleeding out in slow motion. Another sign? She keeps emotional access to him alive, even if the relationship is supposedly dead. Not always through direct contact. Sometimes through memory, sometimes through stories. Sometimes through songs, old photos, random references, subtle emotional preservation. She keeps the wound polished. She keeps the door emotionally unlocked. She says she wants to move on, but she keeps feeding the bond that prevents it. Understand this. You do not move on from what you continue to emotionally maintain. If she's still curating the attachment, she is not free. And no, this does not require malicious intent. That's where men get trapped. They think if she's not evil, then the situation must be safe. Wrong. Someone can be sincere and still unavailable. Someone can be kind and still be incapable of meeting you. Someone can enjoy your presence and still not be emotionally open to build with you. Pain doesn't always come from bad people. Sometimes it comes from unavailable people you keep trying to turn into available ones. That is one of the hardest lessons a man ever learns. You want to believe effort creates readiness. It doesn't. Effort can reveal character. Effort can build trust. Effort can strengthen something healthy. But effort cannot resurrect emotional vacancy. Effort cannot compete with unresolved attachment. Effort cannot make a woman release a bond she secretly still values. So why does this happen? What's the root cause? The root cause is almost never just she misses him. It's deeper than that. She may miss how she felt around him. She may miss the version of herself that was more alive, more reckless, more wanted, more emotionally flooded. She may be attached to unfinished business. Human beings are not just attached to people. They get attached to emotional experiences, identity states, internal stories. Maybe he represented obsession. Maybe he represented rejection she still wants to reverse. Maybe he represented a fantasy ending she never got. Maybe she is not in love with him anymore. Maybe she is in love with the unresolved part of herself that still wakes up when she thinks about him. That's called emotional unfinishedness. And unfinished emotions are expensive, not just for her, for you. Because when you step into a woman's life while she is emotionally unfinished with someone else, you become vulnerable to a brutal role without realizing it. You become the stabilizer, the rebound without the label, the clean man she leans on while she metabolizes someone dirtier, louder, more chaotic, more damaging. You become the man who gives reassurance while another man still owns significance. You become the man she says she appreciates while she withholds the kind of surrender, softness, curiosity, and emotional investment that make appreciation mean something. You get respect on paper and emptiness in practice. And a lot of men live on those crumbs for years. They say, at least she's honest. At least she still talks to me. At least she says I'm good for her. At least she says she's trying. No, stop. A relationship is not measured by what almost exists. It is measured by what is consistently lived, presence or absence, congruence or contradiction, availability or excuse, reality or fantasy. You cannot build a future out of potential that never becomes pattern. Here's another sign no one talks about. She gives you access to her problems, but not to her core. She'll vent to you, lean on you, process with you, use your calm, use your strength, use your listening. But when it comes to real intimacy, she stays hidden. She is emotionally expressive about life, but emotionally restrained about love. She shares stress, but not devotion. She shares stories, but not surrender. She lets you hold her weight, but not her heart. That's not deepening. That's emotional outsourcing. And if you confuse being needed with being chosen, you will let that arrangement destroy you. Being needed is not the same as being desired. Being useful is not the same as being valued. Being available is not the same as being loved. A lot of good men get trapped because they were taught to be dependable, but never taught to ask whether their dependability is being reciprocated with genuine emotional investment. So they stay, they carry, they hope, they perform. They tell themselves their steadiness will eventually win. But love is not a reward for endurance. A woman who is truly available doesn't need to be convinced to emotionally arrive. She arrives. You also need to understand what this costs you if you ignore it. It costs you your center. That's the first price. You become reactive. Her mood becomes your weather. Her distance becomes your obsession. Her inconsistency becomes your schedule. Instead of living your life, you start monitoring hers. Instead of building your purpose, you start studying her patterns. Instead of protecting your peace, you start rationalizing her confusion. That's not love. That's emotional dependency wearing a noble mask. It costs you your standards. You begin accepting what you would have rejected 6 months earlier: mixed signals, delayed responses, half-truths, strange boundaries, emotional intimacy with no clarity, contact with exes that's nothing, stories that don't add up, warmth when she needs something, coolness when you need certainty. You don't call it out because you're afraid truth will end what hope is still pretending can be saved. So you shrink. You become flexible where you should be firm. That's called self-abandonment. It costs you your masculinity. And I don't mean some cartoon version of masculinity. I mean your groundedness, your calm, your self-command, your ability to stand in reality without begging it to change shape just because the truth hurts. A man loses himself the moment he starts negotiating against what his own eyes can already see. You know something is off. You feel the split. You feel the hesitation. You feel that you are tolerated more than embraced. But because you fear loss, you betray perception. And when a man betrays perception, he cannot trust himself. When he cannot trust himself, he becomes weak in all areas: business, discipline, purpose, presence. Everything starts to leak. Now let's reframe it. Her emotional attachment to someone else is not your cue to compete harder. It is your cue to see clearer. It is not a challenge to conquer. It is a reality to evaluate. This is not about punishing her. This is not about shaming her. This is not about controlling who she talks to, what she feels, or how long her healing takes. She has every right to be where she is. But you also have every right to refuse to build your life inside somebody else's unresolved chapter. That's the power move, not control. Clarity. And clarity changes your posture. You stop asking, how do I make her let go of him? Wrong question. You ask, is she emotionally available enough for the kind of relationship I require? You stop asking, how do I prove I'm better? Wrong question. You ask, why am I auditioning for a role that should be offered freely? You stop asking, what if leaving makes me lose my chance? Wrong question. You ask, what exactly am I staying for if I have to keep abandoning myself to stay? That's when you begin to become dangerous in the right way. Not dangerous because you manipulate. Dangerous because you are no longer easy to keep in confusion. Dangerous because your need for honesty is greater than your fear of loneliness. Dangerous because your standards are not for sale. Dangerous because once you see split loyalty, you don't romanticize it. You don't personalize it. You don't chase it. You name it, and then you move like a man. The man who wins here is not the loudest, not the coldest, not the most performative alpha on the internet. The man who wins here is the grounded man. The man whose nervous system does not collapse just because a woman is emotionally unavailable. The man who can care deeply without bargaining away dignity. The man who doesn't fight ghosts. He doesn't compete with memories. He doesn't try to outshine unfinished business. He watches patterns. He listens once. He asks directly. He believes behavior. He honors himself. He has work to do, a body to maintain, a purpose to serve, a life that does not pause because someone else is undecided. That man is calm. He is not desperate for closure because he is clear without a speech. He doesn't need 10 arguments and 12 explanations to know when he is not being fully met. He is respectful, but he is not endlessly available. He is warm, but he is not weak. He can love, but he can also leave. He understands that boundaries are not punishment. Boundaries are self-respect in action. Boundaries are the line where your compassion stops financing your own pain. Become that man. So what do you do practically? First, stop playing detective. Stop snooping, spiraling, decoding every post, every follow, every mood shift. You're not trying to win a case. You're trying to read reality. Second, stop overinvesting before clarity. Do not keep giving boyfriend energy to a woman whose emotional world is still leased out to another story. Slow down. Observe. Third, ask one clean adult question. Not from panic, from steadiness. Ask where she truly is emotionally. Ask if she is fully available for something real. Ask without accusation. Ask without trying to corner her. Then listen to the answer, and even more importantly, listen to the pattern behind the answer. If her words say one thing and her behavior says another, believe behavior. Fourth, stop trying to heal what you didn't break. You are not her rehabilitation center. You are not her emotional waiting room. You are not the safe man she uses until she decides whether she's done worshiping chaos. Have compassion, yes, but do not volunteer for a role that costs you your peace. Fifth, redirect your energy immediately. Back to your body, back to your mission, back to your routines, back to your brothers, back to your standards, back to the parts of your life that make you stronger instead of more dependent. Pain needs direction or it becomes obsession. Do this. Pull back your excess availability. Stop the constant checking. Stop the long emotional labor. Stop trying to convince. Stop trying to be chosen by someone who is still psychologically elsewhere. Replace chasing with structure. Replace overthinking with movement. Lift, run, build, read, work, create, sleep on time, eat clean. Get your mind back under your command. Because the longer you stay unstructured in an emotionally ambiguous situation, the more your mind will turn uncertainty into addiction. Then set the boundary, not a threat. Not an ultimatum thrown in anger, a boundary. Simple, mature, clean. I'm not interested in building with someone who is still emotionally tied to someone else. If that's where you are, I respect it, but I'm stepping back. That's it. No courtroom, no begging, no dramatic performance, no punishment. You state your standard and let life reveal the rest. And if she pulls away, let her. Read that again in your bones. If she pulls away, let her. Because if your absence creates relief instead of regret, your presence was never truly valued the way you wanted it to be. Painful? Yes. Useful? Absolutely. Reality is a gift, even when it arrives like a punch. Better a painful truth now than a slow humiliation stretched over the next year of your life. Some of you are afraid that if you stop chasing, you'll lose her forever. Maybe. But what exactly are you losing? A woman who could not fully meet you? A dynamic built on your patience and her hesitation? A relationship where your role was to absorb uncertainty and call it maturity? Let it go. Not because she is evil, not because you hate her. Let it go because your life cannot be built around someone else's emotional leftovers. That is not bitterness. That is standards. And let me tell you something else. A man with standards becomes more attractive, yes, but that cannot be the reason you do it. If you turn boundaries into a strategy just to get her back, you are still trapped. The point is not to trigger her pursuit. The point is to restore your own alignment. The point is to stop living in reaction and start living in truth. The point is to become the kind of man whose self-respect is not conditional on whether any one woman chooses him. That is freedom. And when you get there, something shifts. You stop taking other people's confusion personally. You stop seeing rejection as proof of inadequacy. You stop making a woman's unresolved emotions your burden to carry. You understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is leave a space where you are being slowly drained. Not loudly, not cruelly, just completely. You don't need to hate her to outgrow the situation. You don't need revenge to recover your power. You don't need closure from her when your clarity is already enough. You just need honesty. Ruthless honesty. The kind that says if she is still emotionally attached somewhere else, then she is not the place where I plant my future. The kind that says my heart is not a backup apartment for someone still waiting on another address. The kind that says I refuse to turn my self-respect into a sacrifice at the altar of potential. This is where your identity resets. You are not the placeholder. You are not the therapist. You are not the transitional man. You are not the emotional support system for a woman still haunted by another bond. You are not here to be almost chosen. You are the man who sees clearly. You are the man who moves with dignity. You are the man who does not beg reality to become fantasy. You are the man who can walk away from divided loyalty without doubting his value. You are the man who chooses peace over confusion, truth over comfort, self-respect over access. And when you live like that, everything changes. Your decisions get cleaner. Your energy gets stronger. Your presence gets heavier. You stop leaking need. You stop radiating fear. You stop looking for someone else to tell you who you are. Because now you know you are not waiting to be selected by the emotionally unavailable. You are selecting the life, the standards, and the relationships that match your level of clarity. That's the real answer. Not how to keep her, how to keep yourself, not how to outcompete another man. How to outgrow the version of you that thought love meant tolerating uncertainty, not how to force her heart back into the room. How to stop entering rooms where your spirit has to shrink just to stay. So if this truth hit you where you've been avoiding yourself, good. You needed that. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of clarity, the kind that cuts through excuses and puts your mind back in order when emotions try to run your life. And if you're one of the men choosing truth, discipline, and self-respect over confusion, then you already belong here. Stay close. This is where you come to remember who you are.